From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
With Wichita City Manager Robert Layton set to retire, the city is facing a pivotal decision. Will leaders stick with the current system or push for a strong mayor-led government? Some, including the current mayor, say it may be time for a change. Also, a heated debate over Wichita's proclamation process has reignited tensions at City Hall, with council members clashing over proposed changes sparked by a recent controversy. But first, Kansas lawmakers rushed through an historically short session, passing a budget before opposition could mount. But will the state pay the price down the road? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Hello and welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cerullo. Kansas lawmakers wasted no time this session, rushing through a state budget and adjourning weeks earlier than normal. But with federal COVID relief funding running out and no clear revenue plan in place, some are warning the state could soon face serious financial troubles. Cake's Nick Nelson has the story.
These cuts and changes affect rural communities that are voting 70-30 Republican. And there is a lot of organized opposition in those communities. And I think that there is an interest in kind of getting things passed before there's enough time for that opposition to build.
Emporia State political science professor Michael Smith believes Republican leadership was able to keep its voting members in line by having them move fast through the bills put on their desks. The session wrapped up Thursday night with the passage of a lawmaker-constructed budget that fully funds education and eliminates certain DEI initiatives. Eastboro Representative Henry Helgerson voted against the budget, saying it's set to put the state of Kansas in a financial hole in 3 years.
The chickens are coming home to roost, and we are in a hole that was created by the ARPA funds and the magnitude of our appetite. And right now, if we don't get a hold of it and control our spending and put a financial plan together, you are going to have more problems than you know how to deal with.
Troy Waymaster, who leads the House Budget Committee, agrees something needs to be done to make up for the loss in revenue due to drying up COVID relief funds.
And there may be the case where there won't be additional federal dollars not coming in that funding programs in the state. And we are going to have to scrutinize our budget.
Smith says there are still leftover ARPA funds in a reserve he believes the state will dip into if it ends up in a budget shortfall. He adds it's still unclear if more federal funds could come from the Trump administration.
The big variable for me is federal funds, because the Trump administration is doing so much, so fast. Medicaid, for example, is heavily dependent on federal funding. And so even more than the revenue projections, we really need to see what's going to go on with that federal matching money.
Here to talk about this and some of the week's other big stories is Democrat State Representative Tom Sawyer of Wichita, Republican State Representative and Speaker Pro Tem Blake Carpenter of Derby, former Wichita City Councilman Brian Fry, and KSN News anchor and reporter Craig Andrus. Thank you all for joining. I'll start on this side of the table with our two state lawmakers. Blake, are we rushing through this too quickly? The professor seems to think we are.
You know, I think we could spend the entire segment unpacking what was just said in that video there. What I'll say is that the Kansas Constitution says that the legislature of the state of Kansas will basically run within 90 days. So instead of doing 90 business days, Monday through Friday, we did 90 calendar days. And so if you actually crunch the calendar, we only lost one session during the 1 week of the normal session. And then 2 weeks basically during what would be our April break. And so for those that are saying we rushed it and this is because of, we're just trying to ram things through or trying to be, not allow everybody to see what's going on in this process, that's absolutely unequivocally false. That's not true. We are just sticking to the 90-day calendar session. Additionally, we got more transparency now, I think, in the Kansas legislature than we had 10 years ago. And so people can definitely follow along. We're going to have a new legislative website, hopefully this next year, so people can follow along even better. And so I would say that we got our business done. We went in and we effectively got to work.
Tom Sawyer, how do you feel? Did you vote for the budget, by the way? How did you vote?
No, I didn't vote for the budget.
Okay.
But in terms of the process, Blake is right in terms of the number of days. It's only like maybe a few days short. But the one issue I really have is I think we should meet after the revenue estimating group meets. They're going to meet April 17th. I think we should always meet after that and take a look at the new numbers, because that's the numbers we're supposed to use to build the budget. But other than that, I don't have a big complaint. The new budget process seemed very rushed this year, but it's new, and we did two things at once. We went to a new budget process and we shortened the session, and that combination I think made it really rough. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year after we've, it's a non-election year. We have all the same people be in place, so the budget subcommittees can start meeting before session starts.
Right.
And
that
that could make the process work a lot better, I think.
Yeah, there's going to be more interim days to study the budget going into the next year. So by the time we start day one, we'll hit the ground running immediately. That's the upside about this new budget process. We didn't wait 3 weeks for the governor's administration to give us a budget package. We were able to start almost immediately.
Is this a case of, more on what the professor kind of touched on, is this a case where Republicans feel they're invincible, though? Supermajorities in both houses, they think they can override any veto the governor might bring?
I wouldn't say any veto. I would say that, we are going to look judiciously at what is vetoed and where the votes are at, and if it's the right thing to do for the people of Kansas. And if we were just a few votes shy, well, we're going to give it a good try to override that veto for the people of Kansas.
All right, let me move over here on this side. Brian Fry, former Wichita City Councilman, what do you have to add here?
I mean, the new budget process will help, I think, certainly, and having the non-election year this year does help with that and getting people to work on it that much quicker. Bottom line is we got to look at the spending and figure out where we can save the money. That's, at the end of the day, that's it.
Yeah. From a reporter's standpoint, Craig, you've covered a few state budgets.
Quite a few.
Yeah, is this a quick timeline here, or what do you think about that?
It has that feel to me, absolutely.
Okay.
So I will bounce the question back to both of you, and I think you may have different answers here. That's why I want to ask this, and I'll ask the question that I wanted answered. And I didn't ask either of you. I will put that caveat out there, but I'm asking now: did we need a new budgeting process? And I know we could go the whole time talking about this. But
was it necessary?
Was it necessary, and where do we move forward? Why is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think we need more time. We need to spend more time on the budget. And my hope was when we went to the new budget process, we would be able to create that time. Because when we sit in those budget committees, it's very fast. Every year it always seems like we're not, and you don't have a chance to really dive into what those agencies do and where we can cut, or it's always tough. So my hope was in the new budget process would give me more time. Well, this year we didn't get it, but my hope is in the future we will. Because actually I felt more, I sit on a budget subcommittee, and I felt more rushed this year than in the past, just because I think the new process with the compressed session made things seem more rushed. So
Blake,
hopefully in the future we'll
Blake,
get that more time.
Let me let you respond to his question. Do you think, was this necessary to change the whole process?
I think so. It was. We used to do this process back in the 1950s before we went to what was the old process, and then now we're back to the legislature basically being back in control and being the appropriators again. But I would even argue that during a Republican's tenure, so I served under Brownback and Coyer, both Republican governors, but I think that this would have also been very helpful to us as far as a legislature is concerned if we would have been able to get in there and do deeper dives on these budgets. And the reason why is because these agencies, in many cases, they know all they have to do is give us a short answer, or give us those answers, drag it out for that 90 days, and then we're gone. And so that's the problem that we've experienced as legislators.
Understood. We'll move on. Wichita Mayor Lily Wu is suggesting it might be time for Wichita to consider a change in city government. That could mean eliminating or lessening the authority of the city manager position and making the mayor the city's chief executive. This comes as Wichita City Manager Bob Layton announces his retirement after 16 years. At her weekly media briefing on Thursday, Wu said that she'd like to hear public input on the idea as the city council considers its next steps in replacing Layton. Fringe University's political science professor Russell Arbin Fox seems to agree that Wichita should consider moving away from a council-manager system and adopt a strong mayor form of government, similar to what's going on in Tulsa and Kansas City. Fox told the Wichita Eagle that such a system would be more democratically accountable and politically effective. With no current city council members having ever hired a city manager, the process ahead could shape Wichita's leadership for many years to come. Brian Fry, I'll start with you, former Wichita City Councilman, of course. I think you've been a proponent of the council manager form of government. What do you think about this?
So bottom line is, this is a big business. City council, the city government is over 3,000 employees, an annual operating budget of $300 million plus, and then a capital budget of close to $400 million. It's hard to find someone that can lead that effort. The city manager is basically the CEO, the chief executive officer, right. And the council and the mayor are the board of directors, with the mayor being the chairman of the board. The council should be setting the policy, the direction, the budget narrative, and then letting the city manager do the professional job of running the city. Because it's very difficult to find someone at that level to do it. Then it becomes very partisan, very political. Yeah. Again, the council takes 4 votes to get anything done. And those 4 members that make that, or 5, or 6, or 7, then they direct the manager to do that. And that's really what happens, and that's the way it should be.
And changing the form of government would actually take an election, wouldn't it?
It would have to go to a referendum, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. The council can't just decide that on their own.
Right. Craig Ondas, what do you have to add here?
Pardon me. I had an interesting conversation yesterday with Stephanie Newbold with the WSU Hugo Wall School of Public Affairs. And she pointed out that across the country, there are 93 million Americans that are governed by the city council and then city manager system right now. And I asked her what the pros are, and she skipped right back to the cons, saying there are some downsides here. So her opinion was that there aren't a lot of pros to moving away from a city manager. She felt that a strong system of having a city manager was probably a good idea. Now, I will say this, it would take, of course, a majority of the council to vote to even get this up for a public referendum. Mm. So I will ask you the question. You're pretty plugged into, I will say, politics here and the city both. Does it get really political, down into the weeds political, if we have people wanting to move away from the city manager style of government?
It certainly does. Yeah. Yes, it certainly does. And you've seen that in other cities. I mean, you can look to the large cities in New York and Chicago, et cetera, where it has become very political and very partisan. Again, this is a collective, a body of electeds who are supposed to represent the entire city. And yes, there are districts where a council person has that responsibility, but you're also supposed to see the bigger picture of it and not get into those partisan and political ways. But you can argue the pros and cons both, but I think it works really well when you have this size of government to have a chief executive who knows how to do that. And finding an elected mayor who has that ability is very difficult.
I will say this too. Everybody that I've talked to, and I put together a couple of stories on this so far, looking at the pros and cons and looking at how this would work, everybody to a person has told me that the CEO, I guess, we'll go ahead and call him CEO for now, or Robert Layton, shines when it comes to making sure budgets work and making sure that we have a good credit rating in Wichita, which we do. I understand we just got our credit bumped up again a little bit in terms of borrowing power. So, the question then becomes, do we have somebody who could take on that role that maybe has an MBA or has that right degree?
That's what a national search would hopefully find too. So, Brian, let me ask you one more question. There's also discussion or rumors that I've heard that Sedgwick County Manager Tom Stoltz may soon be retiring as well. And that brings up the possibility in the middle of all of this of more consolidation as well. From your former council member standpoint, What do you think about Wichita and Sedgwick County combining services?
Well, just like with our state budget, you always have to look at how to reduce cost and figure out how to get more value for the taxpayer. And if there are areas where the city and county can combine and share some services and save some dollars, absolutely should be looked at that. I think it becomes very challenging because of the nature of the city and the rural and how the different divisions are funded, like take the fire department, for instance, with the fire districts. I know when I was on council, we tried to merge cultural arts and park with the county, and there was resistance.
Yes.
So it's going to have to be a process, and you got to look for those ways where you can save, because at the bottom line is the taxpayers.
Yeah. All right. Our next story, the Wichita City Council had a heated discussion on potential changes to the city's proclamation process after controversy over Mayor Lily Wu's handling of a proclamation for Transgender Day of Visibility. Proposed changes include shifting the language to make proclamations reflect the council as a whole, requiring council sponsorship, or creating a public record of proclamation votes. While some council members supported these changes, others, like Councilmember Maggie Ballard, raised concerns about how they were being introduced. Mayor Wu stood by the changes, emphasizing transparency and fairness in the process moving forward. And again, Brian, I'll start with you on the former council member here. Look, Mayor Wu has been a lot of people are claiming Mayor Wu has been trying to shift blame in this through the whole time. She clearly did not support that proclamation. Why is it necessary? I guess my question is it necessary to upset the apple cart because a couple of council members didn't like one proclamation? This has never happened before in the whole, from what I understand.
Yeah, you know, the 9 years I served on council, I can't remember how many proclamations that came
There's
across
4 or 5
my desk.
every day.
And the process certainly can be improved and more transparent. I think that's just been some of the discussion, is how to make this so that the public knows who's voting. Look, you are elected to make a vote. You are representing your neighbors, and that's why you're there, to make those votes. And so you should be able to stand by those, and they should be as transparent and open as possible. So the process can certainly be improved.
All right. Craig Andres, from a reporter standpoint, this has been, gosh, this story just won't die, it seems like.
It has kept going, and we're told there was a clerical error somewhere. So I guess my question is the process of how we do these proclamations. Don't necessarily do all of the background in public. So I'll go ahead and ask Brian if you could step in on this. When you're doing a proclamation, you might get emails back and forth. That's my understanding.
So we would get a request from staff to say, here's a proclamation that has been requested. Do you approve or not? And you look at the proclamation. If you took the time and read it to make sure you understood there's a couple of proclamations where I questioned some of the language in it.
Right. And
said, hey, what is this? Who is this group? I don't know that every council member did that, but I know that I did. And so then the staff would collect the number to approve it. And if there weren't enough, then it would go back to the council saying, hey, we don't have enough. Does anybody want to weigh in or give a vote? So that process certainly needs to be improved. It needs to be much more visible. It should be part of the public record, whether it's at agenda review or as part of the consent package. I think the public deserves to know who voted on what, or if they didn't vote.
Is there a possibility you could do this at district advisory boards to at least get them started to have,
Yeah,
hey, let's
that's an
take a look
idea.
at this, or is that?
I think the process could be discussed at the district advisory boards, but I think the main council meeting is where it needs to be voted on.
All right. Our next story, local business owners in Wichita are already feeling the impact of President Donald Trump's new tariffs set to go into effect next week. As Cake's Jocelyn Schifferdecker explains, prices for many products at local stores may be going up.
You need some help there?
For 40 years, spice merchant owner Robert Bayowie has been selling teas, coffees, and more in downtown Wichita.
Lots of grocery items in here, coffee mugs and stuff.
But now he's going to have to pay more for products. This is after President Donald Trump announced new tariffs Wednesday afternoon.
This will be indeed the golden age of America.
And that's going to affect the retail price. There's only so much that the importing companies and the retailers can adjust in their pricing.
This invoice from a company out in Canada shows how Bayowie is already feeling the impact of these tariffs. See the line that says tariff surcharge? He says he's never seen that on the bill before, and it cost him an extra $600. He imports most of his inventory because he says he can't just buy his products from anywhere.
We know the suppliers we love and trust. There are a lot of particular items that somebody has that nobody else is going to have. So you can't just substitute easily.
This means he may have to raise prices.
We may have to take a short markup to make it attractive. You can't price yourself out of the market.
Economic expert Dr. Larry Straub with Newman University reacted with this.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. We're in a full-blown trade war right now, and it's of our own making.
He explains what exactly these reciprocal tariffs mean.
Anybody that has a tariff on us, he is going to tariff them at exactly the same rate.
Dr. Straub says everyone will likely feel the effects.
I just don't think anybody thinks this is going to have a happy ending.
Dr. Straub says it would likely take a decade to see any benefit. For now, business owners like Beowi will have no choice but to navigate with these new prices the best they can.
It has to be that our customer doesn't blame us. We're the victim and they're the victim.
Representative Sawyer, the Trump administration continues to go forward with this tariff plan, but local businesses, economists nationwide seem to be disagreeing with it. Tell me your thoughts.
It scares me a lot. He's talking billions and billions in tariffs. That amounts to the largest tax increase in U.S. history because tariffs are a tax. The question is who's going to pay them, and I think consumers largely are. I hope he realizes the error of his ways because one thing we can see the president do, he changes a lot. So hopefully he'll give up on this and cut back before it does any big damage. But it scares me a lot. Herbert Hoover liked tariffs, and that did not go well. It scares me about the future of the country. You see how the Dow's reacting. They obviously think it's not good for the economy either. So hopefully they change their minds and cut back on these tariffs.
Representative Carpenter?
Well, I think the professor from Newman there was talking about how, we might not see the benefit of this within until 10 years or more. So I think at the end of the day, only time will tell on whether or not this was a good move or a bad move. And as other countries look at their tariffs that they have on the U.S. and they start reducing those tariffs, then we'll have to see. I think it's still too soon to tell if those tariffs are also going to go down, and it's going to end up being better for us in the long run.
All right. And before adjourning, some Kansas lawmakers discussed a bold plan for what they call a freedom fund. They say it could eliminate property taxes entirely in the state of Kansas within 8 years without cutting any services. Representative Blake Carpenter's proposal calls for the creation of a board that would review and eliminate sales tax exemptions, which currently cost the state $9 billion annually. The money saved would then flow into a new fund that, over time, could replace property and income taxes with earned interest. To get there, though, lawmakers would need to approve this plan and place the proposal on a general election ballot for voters. Representative Carpenter, that's why I brought you in here this week. So
that's why I'm here.
This is a big shift, possibly. Tell me a little bit more about this plan and how you believe it'll be successful.
Absolutely. So what it's doing is it's creating a constitutionally protected fund that lawmakers, governors cannot raid. And so as money gets placed into that fund, the principal will never be touched. And so you'll always generate interest off of that fund every single year. And so over time, what would happen is that it will then basically supplant or replace property taxes and income taxes. Now, when you say property taxes, it's only state property taxes. It's not the local governments. So I want to be very clear about that. The state of Kansas collects 21.5 mills today, which is about $900 million. And so it would basically happen within the first decade. If you can there's some assumptions baked into that pie, but if you can basically hit those assumptions, you can basically have all that done within the first 10 years. And then another 20 years after that, you can have all income taxes completely eliminated and paid for here in the state of Kansas. We don't cut services because now we're generating enough interest from those funds to replace those services or that revenue.
Understood. Representative Sawyer, tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a very intriguing idea. I told him that when we had the hearing in the House Tax Committee. And I thank them for bringing up this concept because I think it's something we ought to look at. We've talked about for years that we have way too many sales tax exemptions in Kansas. And the legislature at various times have tried to get rid of some of them, and we always fail. Politically, it's just hard to do. So if this concept, I mean, it talks about $9 billion. Well, $9 billion includes a lot of sales tax exemptions we can't get rid of, like the business to business and stuff. But there's still $2 billion plus that are, to me, that we ought to really look at whether we need to get them or not. And if we could take those off, this could create a fund that does exactly what he says. And this concept isn't totally new. I mean, countries like Sweden have done something similar, and it's been successful there. So, and it works a lot like endowment funds at universities. So I like that concept. I like the idea of getting rid of the property tax at the state level. I would prefer to do something other than get rid of the income tax. I'd rather let's maybe cut the sales tax, cut motor vehicle taxes, do some other things. That, well, but.
And to his point, so I think when we're going to study it over the interim, so we're going to make sure that this is something that's feasible, the math works, it all checks out, and so by 2026, this is something that we could consider. That being said, one of the things that we are looking at as a possibility of bringing up as the first thing for elimination is actually all property taxes on vehicles. It's $450 million. And we could do that within 5 years. Again, assuming that you hit all the assumptions that are baked into that pie.
Let me ask the question I'm dying to ask. I'm going to jump right in. I'm a journalist, and I'm going to play that role. At what point do we gain enough entropy that there's enough principle there? Give me a time frame here. When does this work?
So if you were to go after all vehicle property taxes, that's about $450 million that the state of Kansas collects at the county levels for that. So if you can bring in $2 billion a year with 7.5% interest every year, and you allow that fund to compound, then at that point you end up to the point where you can generate enough to bring in $450 million in interest on that fund. Now, if we're talking about
how many years did you say on that?
It's about. I'm giving an extra buffer, but it's about 5, and the reason why is so that fund does not become defunct.
You're not saying that you're not saying income taxes and sales tax could be eliminated in that 5 years completely.
No,
they take longer than that.
This is just the vehicle. So that would be just the motor vehicle tax, and then after that one, you'd probably be looking at about 8 to 10 years for the 21.5 mils for the state property tax. And then after that, you'd be looking at 20 years. So here's the thing. This is not necessarily about the next election. It's about the next generation. We are building a tax foundation and policy that benefits Kansans today, yes, but it also benefits the future generations of Kansas.
Are we counting on like a 6 to 7 to 8% interest rate baked into that?
So the way that
15 seconds.
15 seconds. The way that the constitutional amendment's written is we would have to pass legislation that basically lays out the investment strategy, and the state treasurer would be responsible for that.
Okay. Understood. We're out of time for this week. Thank you so much to Tom Sawyer, Blake Carpenter, Brian Fry, and Craig Andrus for joining us. We'll see you next week.